Wait, come back! You can't leave me here. Do you realize where you've dropped me? This is Arrakis. You've stranded me on Dune! Well, might as well kill some time while I'm trapped on this desert planet. Hello, people of the Earth, stars, Venus, and Mars. My name is Time Lord 1452, and welcome to Arrakis, where it looks like I'll be making content from for the foreseeable future. So, while I'm here, let's talk Dune, which I recently got into last year, and right on time for the new movie coming out. I should have a film book on all things Dune in here somewhere. Ah, here it is. Published in 1965, Dune is the first in a saga of 6 novels written by Frank Herbert, with more sequels and prequels written by Brian Herbert, the author's son, and Kevin J. Anderson, covering a wide variety of themes and topics from ecology to technology, politics, religion, and human emotion. Set about 20,000 years in the future amidst a feudal interstellar society of planet-ruling noble houses, young Paul Atreides and his family accept the stewardship over the inhospitable desert planet Arrakis, also known as Dune, the only known source of the most valuable substance in the universe, the spice melange. But many dangers await on Arrakis, from devious traps set by rival houses to the giant sandworms of the deep desert. The novels are considered by many as some of the greatest science fiction stories of all time and have heavily influenced much of sci-fi over the years, from Star Wars to Stargate. This popularity and influence eventually led to not one, but several notoriously difficult and complicated attempts to adapt the first novel. The first attempt was in 1974 by Alejandro Jodorowsky, which would have been over 14 hours long apparently, with Salvador Dali himself cast to play Emperor Shaddam IV. However, no studio would fund the movie's enormous budget for the time due to its risky ideas, so the project was ultimately cancelled, though a documentary was made about the production and those involved. The second and most well-known attempt was in 1984 by David Lynch, which did end up getting made. However, the movie was a critical and box office bomb, though it has grown quite a cult following and appreciation throughout the years. The third attempt was in 2000 and was the Sci-Fi Channel's first and most successful miniseries, even winning an Emmy for Best Special Effects for the time, as well as spawning the sequel miniseries Children of Dune, and is considered the most accurate adaptation to date. And the fourth adaptation is this year by Denis Villeneuve, which is the one we'll be discussing today. Though, because the movie hasn't been released yet, let's break down the trailer instead. By the way, spoiler warning for those who don't want to know what happens in the book or the movie, but no major spoilers will be given away in this video. Also, while I'll try to include as much lore as possible, if you're unfamiliar with the Dune universe, I highly recommend you watch Quinn's Ideas Dune Explained in 5 Minutes video and or Ted Ed's Why You Should Read Dune video before continuing. The links for the videos will be in the description below. And apologies in advance for every name I'm about to butcher throughout this video. Now without further ado, let's break it down.
There's something happening to me. There's something awakening in my mind. I can't control it.
What did you see?
So the trailer opens on our main protagonist Paul Atreides, played by Timothée Chalamet, previously portrayed by Kyle MacLachlan in the 1984 film, and Alec Newman in the 2000 sci-fi miniseries, on the desert planet Arrakis, also known as Dune. Home to the Fremen, humans previously known as the Zinzuni Wanderers, that migrated to the desert planet, making it their home while adapting to survive the desert planet's hostile environment, and home of the spice melange, a naturally produced narcotic that can increase life expectancy and overall health, as well as expanding consciousness even to the point of awakening prescience, the ability to see into the past, present, and future, which has made the spice the most valued resource in the known universe. However, the spice is so addictive that if someone who's addicted to the spice stopped taking it, the withdrawal would kill them. Now, while it's a little hard to tell, Paul is wearing a still suit in this shot, meaning this is probably set somewhere in the open desert. Still suits are basically high-efficiency filters and heat exchange systems that preserve and recycle lost water.
Perspiration passes through the first layer and is gathered in the second, where salt is separated. Breathing and walking provide the pumping action. The reclaimed water circulates to catch pockets, from which you can drink through this tube at your neck. Urine and feces are processed in the thigh pads.
which are essential for survival on Arrakis because water is such a rare resource there. I mean here, so rare that not only has most life on Arrakis evolved to conserve water and or drink the blood of other creatures, but many Fremen traditions and customs strictly revolve around water preservation. Next, we're introduced to the Fremen warrior and Paul's love interest, Chani, played here by Zendaya, and previously played by Sean Young and Barbara Kodotova, standing on what looks like a cliffside, though not wearing a stillsuit, which might mean she's at a CH, a term meaning village or community, where stillsuit discipline is more relaxed. And this is followed by a shot of her and Paul kissing, in case you didn't know they fall in love. Her blue within blue eyes, called the eyes of Abad, are the result of spice addiction from having lived on Arrakis for so long.
It's the spice. It's everywhere. The air, the food. By the time a Fremen child is 12, his eyes have turned completely blue.
But after she calls out Paul's name, he jolts up in his bed in the Arrakeen Palace, based on the fish designs carved into the headboard of the bed.
Paul's attention went to the carved headboard of his bed, a false headboard attached to the wall, and concealing the controls for this room's functions. A leaping fish had been shaped on the wood with thick, brown waves beneath it.
This is how you do breakdowns, right? This reveals the previous shots are presumably predictions of the future, and all of this is being shown to us while we hear voiceover from Paul during a later point in the story, when his prescient awareness starts to awaken.
There's a crusade coming.
Do you often dream things that happen just as you dreamed them?
Yes.
We then see Paul and his mother, Lady Jessica, looking over the burning capital city of Arrakeen, while either Guild troop carriers or Harkonnen frigates hover above, as Paul mentions a coming crusade, the crusade he's referring to being Muad'Dib's jihad, he sees with his prescient awareness as one of the possible futures. Now it should be noted that the words jihad and crusade are often interchanged throughout the Dune series. Quinn's Ideas made a great video on this topic and goes way more in depth on this. Seriously, watch the man's videos, they will help you understand Dune so much better. And the word crusade does appear in the first book towards the end of part 2, right after the Water of Life ceremony, where Bene Gesserit becomes a Reverend Mother, by drinking poisonous worm bile.
On one side he could see the Imperium, a Harkonnen called Fade Rautha who flashed toward him like a deadly blade, the Sardaukar raging off their planet to spread pogrom on Arrakis, the Guild conniving and plotting, the Bene Gesserit with their scheme of selective breeding. They lay massed like a thunderhead on his horizon, held back by no more than the Fremen and their Muad'Dib, the sleeping giant Fremen, poised for their wild crusade across the universe.
And if this is the exact part Paul is voicing over, this might give us an idea of where in the book the first movie might end. After that, we cut to inside a library in the palace on Caladan, home planet of House Atreides, where Paul stands before the Bene Gesserit Reverend Mother, Gaius Helen Mohiam, played by Charlotte Rampling, and previously played by Sian Phillips, and Zuzana Jaroslova. The Bene Gesserit are a secretive matriarchal order, who, through years of mental and physical training have acquired superhuman abilities, work to attain power and influence to further their agenda of enlightening humanity by creating the Kwisatz Haderach, the one who can be in many places at once, with Reverend Mothers being the general authority among the order, having acquired the extent of Bene Gesserit abilities after changing the Water of Life. Again, poisonous worm bile. And when Mohiam asks Paul, ties directly to the previous set of scenes with him dreaming of the future.
The test is simple. Remove your hand from the box, and you die.
What's in the box?
Pain.
Now we get to the oh-so-terrifying Gom Jabbar test, a Bene Gesserit ritual where the test taker must place their hand in a box that causes extreme pain through nerve induction, while a needle laced with a deadly poison called a Gom Jabbar is held at their neck, and if they remove their hand before the test is complete, they will die by the Gom Jabbar. The purpose of this test is to determine if the test taker is an animal or a human, the idea being that an animal will instinctively remove their hand from the box once they've reached their pain limit, even at the risk of death, while a human can control their own mind and body to resist that pain, no matter how unbearable it becomes, knowing that the risk of death looms overhead. Or over neck, I guess. The reason Paul's being tested is because he's actually a male Bene Gesserit, which is what the Kwisatz Haderach is also meant to be. Coincidence?
You inherit too much power. You have proven you can rule yourself.
We then get our first clearer look at the planet Caladan as Atreides frigates take off from the planet for the royal family's big move to Arrakis. Once they leave the planet, these massive frigates will dock onto an even more massive Highliner, which are Spacing Guild starships that transport passengers and planetary goods across the universe by folding space. After the Butlerian Jihad, all forms of artificial intelligence were outlawed, making faster-than-light travel incredibly dangerous without computers to navigate around celestial objects. To anyone who's seen Solo: A Star Wars Story, this should sound familiar. To get around this, Guild navigators, super-evolved humans mutated by massive amounts of spice melange, use prescience and perform complex calculations to safely navigate the Highliners through space. After this, in a shot of Paul along the coast, we cut to him shield practicing with the Atreides War Master Gurney Halleck, played by Josh Brolin, who Villeneuve previously worked with on Sicario, and previously played by Patrick Stewart and P.H. Moriarty. And Paul does not look to be in the mood for practice.
Not in the mood. Mood's a thing for cattle and love play, not fighting.
The defensive shields used here are protective energy fields utilizing a theory called the Holtzman effect, which not only allows spacecraft to travel faster than light, but is also used to protect the shield wearer against fast-moving matter, while permitting slower-moving matter to pass through. And because of this, nearly all warfare now revolves around this technology, not only making firearms all but obsolete due to their ineffectiveness to pierce shields, or in a lasgun's case, their potential to cause an atomic explosion. Yeah, that's a thing, but also leading to a resurgence in the use of swords, knives, and spears due to them having slower and more controllable penetration speeds.
Fast on defense, slow on attack.
God! The slow blade penetrates the shield.
Now you must learn to rule others. Something none of your ancestors learned.
My father rules an entire planet.
He's losing it.
We then fade to Paul watching what might be the last sunset he'll ever see on Caladan, before cutting to the just Duke Leto Atreides, played here by Oscar Isaac, and previously played by Jurgen Prochnow and William Hurt, who seems to be saying some goodbyes of his own, as he appears to be visiting a gravesite, or possibly a memorial to, his father Paulus Atreides, where Paul's name originates from, with the carved stone seeming to depict the late Duke's death at the horns of a Seleucid bull, which he'd often fight for sport. We even see the preserved remains of the bull being packed up in the shot following an external view of the Atreides palace resting on one of Caladan's many islands, and following that shot we get a clearer look at the Bene Gesserit Lady Jessica, played here by Rebecca Ferguson and previously played by Francesca Annis and Saskia Reeves. Now what Mohiam and Paul are discussing during all this via voiceover refers to the fates of the Atreides bloodline, who, like the Greek house of Atreus, whom House Atreides are believed to be descended from, each lived and or died tragically, with Mohiam predicting more tragedy to come.
He's getting a richer one.
He'll lose that one too.
We fade again, this time to an aerial shot over the dunes of, well, Dune, before cutting to Paul, Jessica, her handmaidens, Leto, Gurney, and Atreides soldiers preparing to exit the frigate, with Paul taking his first step on Arrakis in the following shot. Except it isn't, since whoever's taking this step is wearing a still suit, which Paul was not wearing in the previous shot. So they're probably in the open desert here, not Arrakeen. This particular shot is probably from later on, when Paul and Leto are inspecting spice mining operations. In the next shot, we get a much better idea of the massive scale of these frigates, as a remix of Pink Floyd's Eclipse, composed by none other than Hans Zimmer himself, starts to play, and we see Paul reintroduced to his best friend and Atreides swordmaster of Ginaz, Duncan Idaho, played by Jason Momoa, and previously played by Richard Jordan and James Watson, wearing a pretty sandy still suit, showing he's been on Arrakis for quite a while before anyone else arrived. The vehicles surrounding them are ornithopters, small winged vehicles used for long-distance travel across planets or short-distance space travel, with these particular thopters designed to mimic dragonflies. Accompanying Paul is Gurney, along with the Mentat Thufir Hawat, played here by Stephen McKinley Henderson and previously portrayed by Freddie Jones and Jan Vlasic. Both Henderson and Chalamet had also previously starred in Greta Gerwig's Lady Bird. Mentats, like the Bene Gesserit and Spacing Guild, were meant to replace thinking machines after they were banned during the Butlerian Jihad, and are essentially trained from birth to be human computers, possessing exceptional perception and memory, with these capabilities being greatly increased through the consumption of safu juice, giving Mentats their iconic red-stained lips. Also among the group is a new character named Lieutenant Lanville, played by Roger Ewan, the fight choreographer for the film. And according to interviews, Ewan will reprise Lanville for the sequel, noting a specific scene in part 2 of the book he'll be appearing in. I won't reveal the scene here to avoid spoilers, but if you'd like to know more, I left a link to the interview in the description below.
Arrakis is a death trap.
Kill him.
Now we're introduced to the Fremen and Naib of C.H. Tabor, Stilgar, played here by Javier Bardem, and previously played by Everett McGill and Ua Oxenkecht, dressed in full stillsuit and robes, meaning the shot is probably somewhere in the open desert, with Mohiam noting in voiceover the dangers of Arrakis, which is either referring to the planet's dangerous environment, or the actual trap being set for House Atreides, before cutting to what is presumably the prison planet of the Sardaukar, Seleucus Secundus, where legions of what appear to be Imperial Sardaukar are preparing to board either Guild troop carriers or Harkonnen frigates. The Sardaukar are the elite military force of the Padishah Emperor, renowned and feared for their vicious and recognizable fighting style, rivaled only by the Fremen and the Swordmasters of Ganaz. Imagine a Janissary raised as a Spartan with the undying loyalty of a samurai and the ferocity of a berserker. We then get our first look at the violent and sadistic Harkonnen Glasu the Beast Rabban, played here by Dave Bautista and previously played by Paul L. Smith and Lorenzo I. Kish. Bautista had previously worked with Villeneuve on Blade Runner 2049 and had also previously worked with Brolin on Avengers Infinity War and Endgame. They were Drax and Thanos, and commanding Rabban from behind a thick mist with suspensors fused into his back. The brains behind the plot against House Atreides, his uncle the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen, portrayed by Stellan Skarsgård and previously played by Kenneth McMillan and Ian McNeice. We get another shot of Rabban seemingly killing someone before transitioning to the palm trees of Arrakeen ablaze as Sardaukar and Harkonnen soldiers escort Atreides soldiers taken prisoner, with Rabban visible in the bottom left corner.
This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Jessica is seen running through the desert in a panic at night with no stillsuit on, so this might be when she and Paul are stranded in the desert, before cutting to Paul speaking with the Souk Doctor Wellington Yui, played by Chang Chen, and previously played by Dean Stockwell and Robert Russell, discussing the attempts on the lives of the Atreides family. The black diamond on his head is the tattoo of Imperial conditioning, which makes acts like killing or betrayal nearly impossible. We then get some much better looks at the Sardaukar as they slowly descend from either a troop transport or ornithopter, with the use of anti-gravity devices that also utilize the Holtzman effect called suspensors, the same devices the Baron uses that allow him to walk, or in most versions, float. Now, it should be noted that in the book, the Sardaukar disguises Harkonnen soldiers due to the Emperor not wanting anyone to know of his involvement in the Baron's plot against House Atreides. This change to have the Sardaukar in their actual uniforms might be due to either the Baron or the Emperor being overly confident in the plan and or the Sardaukar that no one would live to identify them, or because no matter what they wear, the Sardaukar are still recognizable by their fighting style and demeanor.
The man held a lasgun in his right hand. There was a casual air of brutality about him, a sense of toughness and poise that sent a shiver. Sardaukar. A Bashar, by the look of him. Probably one of the Emperor's own sent here to keep an eye on things. No matter what the uniform, there's no disguising them.
And in the next shot, we see Paul and Leto dressed in brand new stillsuits and accompanied by Atreides soldiers seemingly going to confront the Sardaukar. Except they aren't. This is again another example of shots ordered to look as if they're connected to the previous shot. This shot is actually before they take off to inspect the spice mining.
Let's fight like demons.
An animal caught in a trap will gnaw off its own leg to escape. What will you do?
I know you.
We transition to Duncan, Idaho, telling someone they should fight like demons. And while that line isn't in the book, Secrets of Dune did make a video on the possible meaning behind that line, which I'll leave a link to in the description. And this is right before we see Duncan brutally fighting several shielded Sardaukar, killing them with single hits while in one of the Imperial ecological testing stations, confirming this film will do what no other version has done, using the shields for more than just practice in the beginning. Okay, twice in the 84 film. After this, we cut to many Harkonnen soldiers with swords, charging the Atreides soldiers wielding spears, and when they clash, their defensive shields light up like Christmas trees on impact. And then we cut back to Duncan, Idaho, killing another Sardaukar that slides off his sword, but this time in Arrakeen, since again, no stillsuit. We then transition back to the Gom Jabbar test, with Mohiam explaining what an animal would do in that situation before asking what Paul would do as the pain starts to become more intense. But here, this seems to serve a double meaning, referring not only to the purpose of the Gom Jabbar test, but also the trap House Atreides is caught in on Arrakis. We get another quick vision of Chaney before transitioning to Paul in stillsuit wielding some projectile weapon that's either a Mala pistol or a stunner. I said firearms were all but obsolete. Not to mention these are typically used by the Fremen since they don't use defense shields, nor can anything else living in the open desert.
Shields are useless in the desert. Even a simple body shield will call every worm within 100 kilometers. Drives them into a killing frenzy.
And then we see Chaney for the first time in real time, with Paul noting that he recognizes her from his visions.
One day, the legend will be born.
Now there is a lot happening in these shots as the invasion takes place. Harkonnen ornithopters or possibly troop carriers rain down from the sky over a burning Arrakis as an ornithopter takes off while Atreides soldiers exit their barracks, either to fight or to escape to the frigates, some of which are being destroyed by artillery, seemingly killing several shielded soldiers and stopping Gurney among others in their tracks. We get another shot of the Baron covered in some sort of black liquid, which might possibly be in reference to a scene in the 1984 film where the Baron showers himself in a black liquid while floating around, which is never explained. Following that is a shot of a very nervous Jessica walking through the halls of what might be the Arrakis Palace as Mohiam begins voicing over about a legend being born, referring to the Kwisatz Haderach, before cutting to Duncan in stillsuit at the Imperial Ecological Testing Station, giving what might be a Fremen or possibly Atreides salute. And we even see Paul give one back while holding a Chris knife in the next shot. Except he doesn't. This again is another example of that editing technique I mentioned. The shot of Paul might actually be right before the fight with Jaime's, since he doesn't acquire the Chris knife until that point when Chani gives him one. The Chris knife is the sacred weapon of choice for the Fremen, carved from the tooth of a dead sandworm. These knives are so sacred that the unsheathed blade is not allowed to be seen by anyone considered to be outsiders or they'd have to die. And once the blade is drawn, blood must be shed. Oh dear. Yeah, this might be a bit of a problem. Excuse me a sec. Anyway, moving on.
All of civilization depends on it.
The future. I can see it.
And here during the spice mining inspection, we get our first official, though mostly shrouded look at Shai-Hulud itself, the giant sandworm of Arrakis, eating an entire spice harvester as Paul and Gurney hang out the back of an ornithopter. And this shot really shows the massive scale the worms can grow to. The entire harvester alone fits right in the center of the mouth. Then Mohiam continues her voiceover mentioning the importance of the Kwisatz Haderach, which ties to why the Bene Gesserit are trying to breed him, as we get another shot of Dr. Yui, this time being escorted by unhelmeted Harkonnen soldiers through the halls of what might be the Arrakis Palace. I wonder what that's all about. Actually, I know exactly what that's all about, but no spoilers. And the Harkonnens look very similar to the Baron and Rabban, having pale skin and no hair, which might be the result of long-term exposure to the heavy industrialization on Giedi Prime, with the smoke blocking out the sun causing their skin to pale and the pollutants causing their hair to fall out. We then get our first look at the Fremen and Imperial ecologist, Dr. Kynes.
We prefer the traditional term planetologist.
Played here by Sharon Duncan Brewster, and previously played by Max von Sydow and Karel Dobry, dressed in formal wear and accompanied by a hovering glow globe through the Arrakis Palace, with two Atreides guards in the background, which might be during the dinner party scene. This transitions to a shot of three ornithopters flying back to Arrakis from the open desert, probably right after the spice mining inspection that, could have gone better. And following that, we see Rabban again, this time leading a group of Harkonnen soldiers, both helmeted and unhelmeted. This is also the first version of Rabban where we see him carrying his Inkvine whip. Inkvine is a creeping plant native to Giedi Prime that marks those whipped with tattoos that cause residual pain for many years. The scar on Gurney's face is actually from a lashing given to him by Rabban with an Inkvine when Gurney was a slave on Giedi Prime. We then cut to Duke Leto covered in blood with a hand grabbing his arm. Don't worry, not his blood. But then whose blood? And who done it? And Paul is shown again in stillsuit discussing his prescient awakening with presumably Jessica, or possibly Chani, tying back to the voiceover at the beginning of the trailer before cutting to another shot of Stilgar in stillsuit and robes. Whew, what I wouldn't give for a stillsuit right about now. This desert heat's really starting to get to me.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer.
My Lord Duke.
Where the fear is gone, only I will remain.
And now we get to the Tahadi challenge, with Paul holding a Chris knife to the Fremen fighter Jaime's, played here by Babs Alusan-Moken, and previously played by Judd Omen and Christopher Lee Brown, brought upon by Jaime's invoking Amtal, which summarized means, to know a thing well, know its limits. Only when pushed beyond its tolerances will true nature be seen. Though in the book, the Tahadi challenge happens while the Fremen are resting in the Cave of Ridges, not in the open desert. So this either happens before they reach the cave, or they suit back up and go outside just for this. Afterwards is an overhead shot of what might be Arrakis bombarded by artillery fire as either a guild troop carrier or Harkonnen frigate hovers above, before cutting to Duncan covered in blood, and pointing his blade at an unseen opponent. Following that, we see more visions of Chani before cutting to Paul screaming in agony, which might also be a vision based on the color palette, though the context behind this shot isn't very clear. Let me know what you think this shot is of in the comments below. And during this shot, Paul begins reciting the litany against fear through voiceover, used to help focus one's mind in times of peril, like the Gom Jabbar test.
I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. and when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain.
Paul and Jessica are then shown to be in the cockpit of an ornithopter, which according to the Dune Imperium card game by Direwolf Digital is a smuggler's thopter, and is the same one from this leaked image, being piloted through a Coriolis storm, one of the principal dangers of Arrakis. These violent sandstorms can reach speeds of up to 700 kilometers per hour, powerful enough to rip flesh from bone, guaranteeing anyone caught in one would die. After that, presumably Paul in stillsuit while in the open desert, kneels down and picks up a clump of sand that also contains traces of the orange spice melange, giving us our first look at the most valuable commodity in the universe. So small, yet so powerful. The shot is also probably during the spice mining inspection based on the abundance of spice in his hand as well as what might be an ornithopter in the background, the sand being blown by its flapping wings. The shot transitions to the open desert where Duncan in stillsuit kneels to Paul and acknowledges him as Duke, before transitioning again to Paul walking away from Fremen he's surrounded by as they walk away from him. So this might be the aftermath of the Tahati challenge with Jaime's possibly, since Paul also had a nosebleed in the previous shot while fighting him. Now here we see what appears to be drum sand.
Drum sand? Halleck asked. A condition of sand compaction, Kynes said. The slightest step sets it drumming. Worms always come to that.
And it looks like one did as Paul and Jessica run as fast as they can across the sands to a rock surface, as a worm breaks the surface in an eruption of sand and quickly pursues, attracted to the sounds of them running, with Paul barely reaching the edge when the Maker rises even more and bends towards them before suddenly stopping.
A silver-grey curve broached from the desert, sending rivers of sand and dust cascading all around. It lifted higher, resolved into a giant, questing mouth. It was a round, black hole with edges glistening in the moonlight.
But what caused the giant sandworm to halt its attack? I guess you'll have to watch the movie to find out. And that was the first Dune trailer, but thankfully not the last, because while I was breaking down the first trailer, the second trailer dropped, as well as a ton of promo footage. Yeah, I'll just cover the new trailer, but I won't be mentioning any reused footage from the first trailer unless any significant changes or additions have been made to it. So again, without further ado, let's break it down.
My planet Arrakis is so beautiful when the sun is low. Rolling over the sands, you can see spice in the air.
We open with an overhead shot of Arrakis' vast desert as three ornithopters can be seen flying over a sea of dunes, either heading to or possibly returning from the spice mining inspection that, could have gone better, before cutting to Chani seemingly standing in the open desert, though not wearing a stillsuit. So this might be another shot of her at or near a CH, or possibly another prescient dream of Paul's, with Chani describing the desert's beauty during sunsets via voiceover as shots play showing us just that.
The outsiders ravage our lands in front of our eyes.
Chani then explains the dark history of how outsiders, referring to the Harkonnens among others, have ravaged Dune for melange, while we're shown what has been confirmed by those who got to see the IMAX preview screening, lucky, to be a Harkonnen spice harvester, which has a vastly different design compared to the harvesters used by House Atreides, caught in what looks to be some type of dust storm, not to be confused with a Coriolis storm that can tear flesh from bone, with the two Harkonnens in the distance seemingly guiding the harvester and or other Harkonnens through the storm using a staff with a light on top of it. We get a much closer look at the Harkonnen soldiers seemingly patrolling the area around the harvester dressed in full armor, helmets, and robes while carrying what might be rifles. In an interview with Entertainment Weekly breaking down the first trailer, Villeneuve described the Harkonnens' armor as being closer to an astronaut suit to protect them from the desert planet's environment and sunlight on account of their skin not being used to the sun due to heavy clouds of pollution obscuring the sunlight most of the time on Giedi Prime. And after another shot of Chani from later on in the movie based on the different lighting and no storm, we see the spice harvester unleashing a barrage of artillery from above onto the battlefield below, killing not only the Fremen seemingly assaulting the harvester, but also the Harkonnens defending it.
Their cruelty to my people is all I've known. What's to become of our world? Paul.
Johnny continues to narrate how all she's known is the Outsiders' cruelty to the Fremen, before cutting to piles of burning corpses in Arrakis? Sweet Shy Halou, this movie's gonna be graphic. The reason the Harkonnens may have burned the bodies might be so the Fremen can't reclaim any of the water, since as previously mentioned, Fremen traditions revolve around strict water preservation and discipline, which even includes recovering the water from dead bodies.
A necessity when one lives in the deep desert. The human body is 70% water. Surely a dead man no longer requires it.
Or they're just burning the bodies to get rid of the evidence. Or both. Following that horrific sight, we get a few shots of a bloody crysknife before cutting to Cheney dressed in full still suit, accompanied by other Fremen retreating into a cliffside, with her stopping to look back for an unknown reason. We then fade to an orbital view of the desert planet as what has been identified as Harkonnen frigates leave Arrakis after losing their planetary fief, or territorial obligation, to House Atreides, with Cheney left wondering what'll become of her home once the new stewards take over.
Oh boy!
Hey, Duncan, can I trust you with something?
Yes, always, you know that.
I've been having dreams about a girl on Arrakis. I don't know what it means.
Dreams make good stories. But everything important happens when we're awake. Look at you. Put on some muscle?
I did?
No.
We see a glider, or possibly ornithopter, skimming across the water on Caladan before cutting to inside a hangar where Paul greets the pilot, who's revealed to be Duncan Idaho, whom Paul asks about dreams he's been having of Cheney on Dune as a shot of someone wearing stillsuit and robes walking without rhythm through the open desert plays, before cutting back to Duncan giving Paul, honestly, some pretty good advice, followed by him teasing Paul for having no muscle, which might be in reference to how in the book Paul is unusually small for his age, a surprise to many when it's revealed how great a fighter he is.
Is he not small for his age, Jessica?
The Atreides are known to start late getting their growth, Your Reverence.
So I've heard. Yet he's already 15.
Fun fact, according to an interview with Jason Momoa from Total Film, that muscle teasing was inspired by outtakes Momoa said to Chalamet that Villeneuve decided to incorporate into the movie, with Chalamet apparently getting back at Momoa by kneeing him in the balls during the hugging shot from the first trailer. Now it should be noted this scene was invented just for the movie and doesn't appear in the book, most likely created to better establish Paul and Duncan's close friendship described in the book.
We are House Atreides. There is no call we do not answer. There is no faith that we betray.
Smile, Gurney.
I am smiling.
Following that, we see a large white spherical craft land on Caladan where Leto, Gurney, Thufir, Jessica, and Paul, all wearing military dress uniforms and formal wear, while accompanied by soldiers also in dress uniforms, await to greet the Imperial envoy who, as confirmed by Secrets of Dune, is called the Herald of the Change, played here by Benjamin Clementine, which may or may not be related to the Judge of the Change, an Imperial officer charged with presiding over a change of planetary fief, who in the book is actually Dr. Kynes. And accompanying the Herald is a Bene Gesserit played by Sawad Fares, along with our first look at members of the Spacing Guild, their helmets and masks presumably filled with spice gas that will slowly transform them into guild navigators, though their uniforms are different from how they appear in the Dune board games, so either the uniforms seen here are formal wear, are tied to their ranks within the guild, or their design was changed. The reason the Herald is visiting, as you might have guessed, is he's here to inform Leto that House Atreides will be assuming control of the desert planet and spice mining operations. This is another scene that was invented just for the movie, since House Atreides is already leaving Arrakis at the start of the book, having accepted the fiefdom sometime before, and all this is being shown to us as Leto voices over the values of House Atreides. There is no call they do not answer, no faith that they betray.
The Emperor asks us to bring peace to Arrakis. House Atreides accepts.
I know you. There's something awakening in my mind.
You need to face your fears.
Come with me.
Now here we get our first official look at a Spacing Guild Highliner, the massive ship used to transport people and goods by folding space, as we see a Bene Gesserit spacecraft, also confirmed by the Dune board games, exiting the Highliner and descending toward Caladan, so this might be right before the Gom Jabbar scene, though the planet seen at the other end of the Highliner has actually sparked some theories as to how the folding of space will be executed in the movie, leading many to wonder if the planet is simply unfinished VFX, or the most likely theory, rather than the entire Highliner and cargo being transported across the universe, the Highliner instead acts as a space bridge between 2 points for ships to pass through. Following that shot, we hear Leto via voiceover accepting the fiefdom and Emperor's request to bring peace to Dune, before cutting to a new shot of Cheney and then to Paul during the spice mining inspection, which is a mirrored shot of the opening of the first trailer, who begins hearing voices that at first I thought was the voice, a Bene Gesserit technique that allows control of another by pitching their voice certain ways, but instead might be from Paul's prescient awareness expanding due to spice ingestion. And after hearing this, we get a collection of quick shots that include the burning palm trees in Arrakis, an eruption of sand from a worm breaching the surface with a spotter or Harkonnen probe ship in the background, the Baron covering his face, Atreides frigates being destroyed by artillery, and Jessica with the eyes of Abad and Jacobsa markings on her face, which might be during the Water of Life scene or possibly some point in the further future. And then we see Chaney handing Paul her Chris knife, which is mentioned in the previous trailer breakdown he receives right before the Tahati challenge, before cutting to our first clearer look at Jaime's.
You need to be ready. You never met Harkonnens before. They're not human, they're brutal.
We transition to 3 ornithopters flying over the capital city of Arrakis, either heading to, or possibly returning from, the spice mining inspection. Again, could have gone better, before cutting to Paul having exited the frigate where we get our first clear look at an Atreides helmet, which according to Secrets of Dune appears to be inspired by a hooded hawk, the hawk being the symbol of House Atreides. And in the following shot on Seleucus Secundus, we see a Sardaukar played by Istvan Aldat along with many others participating in what Secrets of Dune has confirmed to be a blood ritual, during which the enemies of the Sardaukar, seen strapped hanging upside down, have their throats slit and their blood is used to mark the foreheads of the Sardaukar by some unknown religious figures before going into battle. After that we get some shots of masked Harkonnens bowing and Raban, presumably on Giedi Prime, the homeworld of House Harkonnen, rival to House Atreides, before cutting to Gurney after shield practice explaining to Paul the inhumanity and brutality of the Harkonnens that Gurney knows all too well from his time in the slave pits on Giedi Prime. And following that we get more shots on Seleucus Secundus of another unknown religious figure possibly blessing the Sardaukar from atop a tall podium, as well as a Bashar among them, Bashar being a Sardaukar officer rank just above Colonel.
Duke's son sees too much. This is my Dune. Kill them all. God in heaven.
We then hear Peter DeVries explain via voiceover that Paul sees too much as we see Paul in his room in the Arrakis Palace hiding behind a holographic bush from what was recently revealed in the exclusive Chinese trailer to be a hunter-seeker.
From behind the headboard slipped a tiny hunter-seeker, no more than 5 centimeters long. Paul recognized it at once. A common assassination weapon that every child of royal blood learned about at an early age. It was a ravening sliver of metal, guided by some nearby hand and eye. It could burrow into moving flesh and chew its way up nerve channels to the nearest vital organ. Through Paul's mind flashed the related knowledge, the hunter-seeker limitations. Its compressed suspensor field distorted the room to reflect his target. The operator would be relying on motion, anything that moved.
And following that, we see Dr. Yui examining Paul and accompanied by Jessica before cutting back to Giedi Prime, where we get a slightly better look at the Baron as he declares the desert planet his own in a monstrous-sounding voice, while rising with the use of his suspensors hidden under a long shirt, as well as our first official look at the Baron's twisted Mentat assassin Peter DeVries, played here by David Dastmalchian and previously played by Brad Dourif and Jan Unger. Unlike Mentats who are trained to operate within an ethical framework of morality, honesty, and loyalty, twisted Mentats are trained by the Beni Tleilax, master genetic manipulators, to operate without any ethical constraints, allowing them to lie, cheat, manipulate, or commit whatever devious acts the customer might request of them, but are often left warped and psychotic as a result. Think of it like overclocking your computer or jailbreaking your phone. And after that we get a quick look at Leto peering through a window in Arrakis before cutting to Gurney outside the barracks, witnessing dozens of ships exiting the massive Highlander in orbit, followed by a shot of Duncan in the Imperial Ecological Testing Station.
Get everything with guns off the ground! Go!
This is an extermination. They're picking my family off one by one.
Gurney orders his soldiers to get everything with guns off the ground before we see 2 frigates impacted by a single explosion, but are undamaged thanks to their Holtzman shields, though I can't say the same for the other frigates and Atreides soldiers running past them. However, I did say all warfare now revolves around shield technology, so it's great to see they knew to include defensive shields on all vehicles as well. After that we get more looks at the Sardaukar brandishing their blades, along with Leto in brand new still suit after returning from the spice mining inspection.
Let's fight like demons.
We see 3 ornithopters firing missiles into what looks to be the Coriolis storm Paul and Jessica escaped into before flying away, followed by shots of Paul piloting the smuggler's thopter through said storm before cutting to a different ornithopter flying through a burning Arrakis. After that, Chaney is seen in the open desert kneeling behind Fremen firing massive lasguns from atop a cliffside at a Harkonnen carryall and the spice harvester it was transporting, which might be during the Fremen raid on the harvester that we see earlier in the trailer. And following that scene, we see Duncan unsheath his blade and confront a group of Sardaukar in Arrakis, with one shooting a poison dart from a Mala pistol or a stunner that his defensive shield manages to deflect. What'd I tell you? All but obsolete. As Duncan throws his first blade, stunning the Sardaukar before leaping onto them with the use of a suspensor belt and delivering the final blow with his second blade.
Dad, what if I'm not the future of House Atreides? great man doesn't seek to lead. He's called to it. But if your answer is no, you'll still be the only thing I ever needed you to be. My son.
We transition to Caladan, where an Atreides frigate hovers above hundreds of armored Fremen scattered around Atreides flags, based on the closer look we get in the Norwegian promo, seemingly rejoicing at the arrival of whoever's in that frigate.
He had seen a warrior religion there, a fire spreading across the universe with the Atreides green and black banner waving at the head of fanatic legions drunk on spice liquor.
After that, we fade to Paul speaking to Leto at the gravesite or memorial to Paulus on Caladan, with Paul questioning if he's fit to rule their noble house. But Leto reassures Paul that he's already what Leto needed Paul to be, his son. That gets me right in the feels every time.
If anything happens, will you protect Paul?
With my life.
Kynes is seen in the open desert wearing stillsuit robes and backpack while extending maker hooks, long thin shafts used by the Fremen to mount, capture, and steer sandworms after spotting worm sign, telltale signals such as static electricity and or surges of sand that indicate a worm is approaching, with the worm being drawn to Kynes because she planted a thumper, as we see in the Fremen promo. A thumper is a short stake with a spring-loaded clapper on one end that's inserted into the ground and pounds repeatedly to attract sandworms. Following that, legions of Harkonnen or Sardaukar forces exiting troop transports clash with Atreides soldiers as a massive explosion fills the screen, before cutting to Leto asking Jessica to protect Paul if anything were to happen, which she does while in the open desert by subduing Stilgar using the Weirding Way, a close-quarters Bene Gesserit martial art where an individual can move at incredible speeds by altering one's perception of space-time, though this shouldn't be confused with the Weirding modules featured in the 1984 film that convert sounds into sonic beam attacks, as those were created just for the movie as an alternative to the Weirding Way.
Only together can we stand a chance.
We then cut to Paul and Jessica seated in the back of an ornithopter flying through a burning Arrakeen, and possibly being piloted by Harkonnens, based on the blurred figures in black uniforms near the cockpit, before cutting to what is presumably the same thopter circling around what has been confirmed by the Dune Adventures of the Imperium board game as the Arrakeen Market, and following that we see a continuation of when Leto found someone wounded in the Arrakeen Palace, with the back of his defensive shield being pierced by an unknown assailant, based on the shield's color turning from blue to red, signifying the shield has been successfully penetrated. After that we get 3 new shots of Paul screaming while on the Imperial Ecological Testing Station, a Harkonnen ornithopter or troop transport getting knocked out of the sky by artillery, and Paul looking over to Jessica and a group of Fremen including Stilgar, all in the open desert. And from beneath the desert sands, adorned in gold armor, emerge what might be the Fedaykin, Fremen death commandos hand-selected to serve as Muad'Dib's personal guard and most elite warriors, engaging hordes of Sardaukar on the plains of Arrakis, with one among the Fedaykin dealing fatal blows to the Imperial troopers, possibly through the use of the Weirding Way, before retracting his mask to reveal the warrior to be Paul, but with the eyes of Abad, meaning this scene might be taking place in the far future, during a raid, or might even be during the Battle of Arrakeen. A worm could even be seen erupting from below the ground in the background, possibly having been attracted by all the rhythmic vibrations produced by each army. We then see Jessica letting Paul know it's time, probably for the Gom Jabbar test, and following that we get another look at Paul with the eyes of Abad, meaning the scene probably takes place in the future, and accompanied by Cheney along with 2 more figures standing behind them in a brightly lit area that seems to match the interior of the frigate we saw earlier hovering over the Fremen warriors on Caladan, so this shot might be from that same scene. And that was the second Dune trailer. We finally started to see a greater marketing push compared to the 10 months since the first trailer was released, where the marketing was solely carried by the Dune fandom and board game companies. However, this movie will only comprise the first half of the novel, so I am asking all of you, veteran Dune fans, newcomers, sci-fi lovers, and average moviegoers, please help spread the word to everyone you know about this movie. And when October 22nd finally rolls around, or earlier for other parts of the world, please support this movie any way you can, whether it be by streaming it, or, if it's safe for you to do so, by experiencing Dune in theaters. Well, that's it for me, fellow viewers. This desert heat's finally done me in. My only regret was, I never got to tell, hey, does anyone smell cinnamon?